everyone. I've decided to read another children's story. This one is one I've chosen. It's called Baby Divine. It's part of me reaching out to people that are at home a bit more than they usually are at the moment and might feel a bit disconnected. I'm sure there's lots of children that would like to hear some stories. So I'm reading different children's and adult stories as a way to connect with you all and hopefully bring some smiles to wherever you are. I hope you enjoyed. This one's called Baby Divine. I grew up with my dad reading this story. It's got some very wacky illustrations in it, which I'll show you. But the reason I liked it so much is because it's written in prose and it's really good fun. The style it's written, and it's got a message about overcoming fear. I think it's a good one for the moment. So it's a very important thing. Now, what was it? Oh yeah. Are you sitting comfortably? Sorry, what was that? Yeah? Then I'll begin. Oh, and it's written by Bette Midler, as you can probably see. The skies were ablaze with disorder that night, the planets aghast and a quiver. The delirious moon had the brass to be full when it should have been only a sliver. A comet appeared, and those who dared peek say stars fell to the earth in a panic. Historians claim that the cosmos eclipsed the excesses of Darrell F. Zanuck. Yes, heavens had worked itself into a frenzy of wild and transcendent design to herald the glory of what was to come, the birth of Baby Divine. A picture here. That's the house where Baby Divine is born. Oh, Baby Divine, what an entrance! As demure as the 4th of July. Mr. and Mrs. Divine didn't know if they ought to rejoice or to cry. Poor dears, they had lived in a most circumspect life, in a house on a nondescript road, surrounded by houses exactly like theirs, all with neat little lawns neatly mowed. And since nothing too madcap and garish or wacky was ever allowed in that quarter, the proper Divines had good reason to hope for a proper presentable daughter. Bing! That's the Divines. So you can imagine their terrible shock when they lay down their babe in her bed and found she'd arrived with high heels on her feet and a sprig of red hair on her head. But the heels and hair do were only the prologue. Another great shock lay in store. For their baby had already mastered a word, and the word she had mastered was more. Yes, more, she cried clearly, and yet again more. The elder Divines nearly fainted. Then she followed that feat with a luminous smile, much as Giotto himself would have painted. But while the Divines stood there wringing their hands, there was cheers in another location, a section of town the Divines only knew by its scurrilous reputation, where baubles and bangles and silly ensembles replaced polyester and chits, and no one would deem it outre if a baby wore high heels or a red henna rinse. In fact, who would notice a baby at all, no matter how chubby her torso, when day after day was like Mardi Gras time, and night after night was even more so? Here no one would snub you or look down their nose if your coat or your mind were in tatters. Be what you want to be, that was their creed. It's the state of your spirit that matters. And smack in the midst of this hullabaloo, in a boarding house close to the track, snoozed 3 dizzy dames whose room seemed to have undergone a ferocious attack. It's like my room. Lily and Tilly and Joyce were their names, and they lived in a heap on the floor. At lunch and at length they would gab about art and theatrical legend and lore. For Tilly had been in the day of her youth adored as a terpsichore, whatever that is, yet never she danced with abandon and not too much else, yet never approached the obscene. And Lily sang opera and lieder and such, and was quite the tempestuous wench. She sang with a passion and diction to match, but lamentably only in French. And Joyce, she told jokes that were top of the line, like the one about Midge and the gorilla. 22 people died laughing at that one. The punchline was really a killer. This is the picture. How do I get? It's amazing. There's loads of like great things in it. I spent a lot of time when I was little looking at all the things in this picture. That's where they live. Gotta get my reading ears properly back on. Well, as legend goes, on the night of the birth, ribbons of radiant light awakened Miss Tilly, who ran to the window and squawked like a duck at the sight. "Girls, girls, get up right away. Come here, look outside. Do you see? The sky over there by the house of Divine is lit up like a giant marquee." Well, needless to say, at the sound of that word, the ladies leapt up in a flash, for it hearkened them back to those ballyhoo days when their act was a certified smash. They pulled on their jammies, they threw on their pearls, they powdered and rouged to excess. They bumbled and fumbled and flew down the street till they came to the hallowed address. They stood on the doorstep and gaped at the sky. A shower of sheet music fell. They shrieked, "What is going on around here?" and nervously rang the front bell. That's the picture. Sheet music falling from the sky. But no one came forward to pierce the enchantment. They felt they were lost in a dream. "I say," Tilly whispered, "this is rather odd. If they don't answer soon, I shall scream." "Oh, calm down," Joyce hissed. "Lily, do calm down this instant. Some restraint for a change would be nice." "Yes, restraint would be nice," Joyce said over again, for she loved to say everything twice. "Now cut it out, ladies," Miss Tilly chimed in. "This isn't the time to be fighting. Just look at the sky. Why, I could have been a star if I'd had this lighting." At last the Divines opened up the front door. We gave at the office," they said. But the overwrought trio paid no heed at all, for they'd spotted the babe in her bed. "Bravo, oh bravo!" they squealed at the child as they elbowed her parents aside. In their hurry to hug her and swoon at her feet, the starchy Divines nearly died. "Just look at those fabulous shoes!" Tilly shouted. "I wish I could get me a pair." And who could resist that ridiculous smile, or the colour and curl of her hair? Then Tilly untangled her favourite boa, more precious than diamonds or furs, and said, "I got this from an ardent marquis, but now she must have it, it's hers." And Joyce offered up a decrepit false nose, which she swore was bequeathed by a Tsar. It's a prop for those times when you want to become someone else than you are. And Lil said, "My gift may seem less than expected, but my dear, it's far more than it seems. and proudly she pulled from the depths of her handbag a flutter of rainbows and dreams. That's the picture. That's the Divines. Baby Divine was quite giddy with joy. She felt her young heart start to soar. She wanted to sing. Oh, you've made me so happy. But all she could manage was more. I'm sorry, how awful, cried Mrs. Divine. My own flesh and blood, so ungrateful. Oh, pipe down, said Tilly. Be proud she's talking. She's really more funny than hateful. So true, nodded Lil. Why, it's actually charming, and good for a kid to want more. Total contentment is only for cows. It tends to turn tots into boars. Stop it! Get out! Bellowed Mr. Divine. This baby is batty enough. The last thing we need is to have her head filled with all of that bohemian stuff. Well, sniffed the three, stomping out in a huff, and muttering much as they went. These people are fools. Can't they see that the kid has undoubtedly been heaven sent? Now the baby, of course, didn't mean to say more. She meant to say thanks, which is far more polite. She was feeling despondent and misunderstood when suddenly out went the light. Baby Divine didn't care for the dark. Still, she wasn't exactly afraid, for in the next room were her ma and her pa, and the sleepy time noises they made. That's my pillow, dear, and more over, please, were some of the sounds that she heard. But then the poor baby heard something so frightful she wished that she'd not heard a word. That baby's not ours, her father exclaimed. Those shoes and that hair, she's a quack. I'm positive somebody made a mistake. Should we think about giving her back? Oh, very nice. Oh dear, sighed her mother, I know what you mean. If only she weren't so flashy. I know this is odd for a mother to say, but I find her, well, just a bit trashy. The baby recoiled as if someone had slapped her. This censure was so unexpected. Was she really so worthless, really so strange? Why was she being rejected? To whom could she turn? From whom could she learn what it takes in this life to belong? Those ladies who gave her the presents, of course, they could tell her at once what was wrong. But where were they now, and what did it matter? She was, after all, just a tyke. She never could reach them from where she was lying. The front door alone was a hike. It would take her forever to crawl on all fours, but the child, ever hopeful, thought maybe, if she tried very hard, she could walk like a grown-up and not have to creep like a baby. She pulled herself up to the edge of her cradle and tossed herself on that chance. She found out at once she could not walk a step. But whoopee could she ever dance. She whirled and she twirled on the tips of her toes and unveiled an exquisite plie. She crashed through the door with a wild pirouette and eagerly went on her way. But she got only one entrapped at the door when she suddenly stopped on a dime, and her heart skipped a beat as, gasping, she gazed on the world for the very first time. Trees under starlight, meadows and mist, houses and fences and sky. When the moon sailed forth from behind a black cloud, why, Baby Divine thought she'd die. And there in the moonlight she glimpsed a white rose her mother had planted in spring. Her kneecaps grew weak with the beauty of it, and her broken heart started to sing. More, more, she screeched, and she shrieked and she shried, and almost as if the world heard, a sycamore rustled, and out of the tree flew a rather preposterous bird. Holy Toledo, thought Baby Divine, whoever conceived of such a thing? A creature that's able to fly through the air. What a thrill it must be to have wings. And then, just as though the bird read Baby's mind, he lightly touched down on her shoulder. You're right, it's a thrill. Come and see for yourself. You can trust me, the scruffy bird told her. 'Cause I've been around, I've been up, I've been down. I look and I listen and I learn. It's a tricky old globe, kid, I ought to know, 'cause I'm just some dim-witted tern. And I bet that a baby with heels and red hair will probably think it's terrific. You'll squeal with delight as we go through for the sun and applaud when we hit the Pacific. It's a nice picture. I think it's done with airbrushes or something. Well, not on your life would Baby Divine say no to the chance to go soaring. She clambered right up to the little bird's back. She was really quite mad for exploring. Off they both sailed towards a dinner-plate moon, over highways and houses and trees. They soared with panache through the cloud made of silk and a bumbling of vagabond bees. But while Baby Divine and the bird were in heaven, her parents were down in the dumps, for they'd found to their horror their offspring was missing, and brother did they feel like chumps. It was Mrs. Divine who discovered the fact that her little tot's cradle was bare. She'd gone to change both the baby and her bottle, and only the bottle was there. Dun, dun, dun. How pale and foreboding she flew to the door, crying out to her spouse, "There's a track!" The footsteps are teeny and murder to follow, but darling, we must fetch her back. The anxious Divine grabbed their coats and their flashlights and started to follow the trail, but 20 yards into the garden it stopped. Their girl hunt seemed destined to fail. Was she snatched off the earth? Was she deep in a hole? Was she kidnapped? Oh no, God forbid! Who'd kidnapped that screwball? Of course, it's those dames. They sure were gung-ho for the kid. Let's find them, cried Mrs. Divine, and confront them. I know we can ferret them out. And off they both ran, while a mile overhead the babe and the bird soared about. Curving round moonbeams they dipped with the breeze. Higher still, higher they flew. The baby was stunned when she glanced towards the earth and beheld the spectacular view. But it wasn't the beauty alone that amazed her, though that in itself was to die. What caused her red hair to uncurl was how odd the neighbourhood looked from the sky. For everything that she thought was so big looked terribly puny and small, and what had seemed hugely important close up seemed not that important at all. For instance, her house, which had seemed so enormous, was hardly Tyrannosaur Rex, and the town she called home just a glimmer of lights in the shape of a capital X. Of course, Baby D, being smart as a whip, did not feel confused but instead felt the glorious thrill she would feel every time a great truth penetrated her head. The truth. It's the point of your view that decides what you see. One man's flop is another man's hit. From manners to movies, the picture keeps changing, depending on where you sit. That's them flying. But still, there was more for the baby to absorb. As they zigzagged their way through the sky, a further surprise was that even the mountains all looked just alike from the high. And she thought, as if it's such a job for a mountain to stand out from all the rest, how hard it must be for a minuscule human, and suddenly Baby felt blessed. My shoes, my red hair, they're my trump card, she thought. Then her brain formed its pithy bon mot. Cherish forever what makes you unique, 'cause you're really a yawn if it goes. The babe felt like Einstein, like Kant, like Descartes, as she pondered this new revelation. To the wonders of and whimsical ways of the world, her soul gave a standing ovation. Now, just at that moment, the elder divines arrived at the lady's front door. They barged right in and tripped over Lil, who was out like a light on the floor. They yelled in the darkness, "Oh, give us our baby!" The ladies awoke to a scare, as the frantic divines fairly ransacked their room in search for some shining red hair. "How dare you accuse us?" The dames were aghast. "This insult is too much to take." One look at their faces convinced the divines they had made an appalling mistake. "We're friends," Tilly cried. "You should ask for our help, which of course would be tickled to grant. You take the high road and we'll take the low road," Tilly thrilled in a dainty descent. Her voice was so piercing the baby could have heard. Her voice was so piercing the baby could have heard, but a thunderstorm rose from the sea. Though the bird and the babe did their best to avoid it, the tempest would not let them be. It smacked them and racked them and blew them around till they shook like a crepe paper ship. Then one blast of thunder and horror of horrors, Baby Divine lost her grip. Head over diaper she fell towards earth, so swiftly she heard the wind whine. She clasped her small hands and looked towards the heavens and prayed she was truly divine. And as fate would have it, her shoes saved the day, for though she came down like a rock, her heels were designed by Monsieur Charles Jourdan, so of course they absorbed all the shock. But though she survived, she was still in a pickle, alone and so far from her home. If only someone would come to help her and lend her a map or a comb. Ever brave and resourceful, the baby thought, "Wait, I really must try and calm down. I'll just stretch out my arms and flap like a bird till I flap myself right off the ground." Then in her mind's eye she saw herself clearly, falling again from the sky. Kaboom went her heart, her legs turned to jelly, her mouth tasted tinny and dry. "You'll never fly," boomed a voice from the dark, and terror struck Baby Divine as a figure in black lumbered towards her and thundered, "At last, little lady, you're mine." The figure was fearful and dismal and huge and wrapped in sulphurous fog. It had snakes round its ankles and moss round its heart, and its voice was as hoarse as a frog's. Even the moon was afraid of its presence and hurriedly slipped out of sight. The air grew chilly and sickly and damp, and a tremor of dread shook the night. Yeah, scary picture. Oh no. That is fear, pure fear. "I'm anxiety, friend of despair. I appear when your courage departs. I find you whenever your confidence fails you, and fear makes a home in your heart." Well, baby Divine didn't like this at all. In fact, she was frightened to death. She started to dance away fast as she could, but the poor thing was soon out of breath. Go on, cried Anxiety, dance for your life. This isn't the last time we'll meet. You'd better learn now there's no way to escape me, for I'm very fast on my feet. To show her the terrible truth of his words, the figure, colossal and dank, charged through the night after baby Divine, and as it pursued her, it stank. It stank and gobbled and belched as it lurched towards the baby, who fell in a swoon, and as it came nearer its eyes caught on fire, and midnight lit up like the moon, like high noon. Then, oh, in a moment, too creepy to mention, the fiend bent down with a grunt. He picked up the child by the scruff of her neck and said, "Say bye-bye, you runt." He swung her way out. He swung her way out like a doll on a string. From his throat came a deafening roar, but all the poor babe could do was to scream, for the last thing she wanted, more! More, more, she pathetically piped, and instantly she became very aware of the dangers inherent in having a limited vocabulary. Well, I've had it now, the besieged baby thought, as she whizzed past those eyeballs in flame. Then suddenly, who should sprint onto the scene but those three irrepressible dames? Hooray! Anxiety reared up and howled when he saw them. Undaunted, Lil cried, "Fiddlesticks! Just look at that big bag of wind! What a humbug! Let's hit him with our bag of tricks." I got a picture. Lil opened the onslaught by screeching off key. Joyce battered the thing with some shtick. Trying on guard, Lily finished him off with a rather unladylike kick. "Phew, that was close," said Miss Tilly to Joyce. "It's a good thing we tracked the kid down." Baby Divine Arabued in relief. They laughed till they fell on the ground. And Anxiety, lurking in shadow nearby, fled in a mad disarray. For a good hearty laugh was a threat to his health, and certain to drive him away. The babe was bug-eyed. Where did the fiend come from? She sensed a divine revelation. The beast had been born from her very own fears. The monster was her own creation. "You imp! Why, you imp!" cried a breathless Miss Joyce. "You put us through torture," cried Lily. "Now, girls," Tilly said, "grab a hold of yourselves. To be mad at an infant is silly. Just think of the problems this kid had to face. She's as mixed up as Lily's chop suey. She's got to be taught what's important and what is only a crock full of hooey." And Lil said, "Then laughter's the place to begin. It keeps life from being a bore. With a good sense of humour, she'll always be rich. Without one, she'll always be poor." Baby Divine sat and played with her steppings. Joyce murmured, "Well, where shall we start?" "Laughter, like life, comes in all shapes and sizes. We must learn to tell them apart." "Let's start with a giggle," said Lil. "It's the smallest, and rather undignified too. Giggles and titters are laughs that slip out whenever a laugh is taboo. Next there's a chuckle, a satisfied laugh, a chuck to yourself that feels good." Baby Divine fluffed some hair on her head and chuckled because she understood. But then there's the mean and insensitive snicker, disrespectful and low on civility. It's a bit unpew trop for a child of your taste and highly refined sensibility. Poor baby Divine had to race to keep up. She'd not heard these distinctions before. She wanted to scream, "I've had quite enough," but out came the usual, "More!" "Well, all right," said Tilly. "Let's end with the loudest, the mighty and rowdy guffaw. When you are guffawing, you're laughing so hard, you may end up flat on the floor." Well, baby Divine thought guffaw sounded great, raucous and free and sublime. She threw back her head and doubled in half and laughed for the very first time. I'll get a picture of laughter. And oh, it feels good just to laugh and to laugh. Such a whoopee and nice thing to do. She thought, "I must do this a lot in my life and make sure that others do too." Then Joyce said, now child, that's enough. Not all things in life are so droll. A good laugh is good for the spirits, it's true, but a good cry is good for the soul. And with that the ladies began to boo-hoo, to weep and to wail and to moan, and teardrops welled up in their eyes like the sea, and many a nose was blown. But baby Divine simply hadn't a clue as to what they were doing or why. Say, Lily, that's simply a brief demonstration of the sad little verb to cry. However, cried Lily, let's not dwell on that. The child has absorbed quite a lot, and crying is something she'll learn by her lonesome, whether she wants to or not. So stop with the lesson. Let's give her a treat to show that what once made us famous. What's a show, thought the baby. She hoped against hope that she wasn't a short ignoramus. But we did so many, whined Tilly, perplexed. Which one do you think would most please her? The pageant, the farce, the mystery play, or the East scene from Julius Caesar? Something with music, of course, cried Miss Tilly. We want to show off all our stuff. There'll be kick lines and punch lines and ditties and damned. Be he who first cries, hold enough. There's no time to dally. Let's put it in gear. And they flew like gazelles on their way. Baby Divine did her best to keep up with a perfectly swell grand jeté. They came to a halt in a darkened backyard where some laundry was hung on a line, and they vowed as they pulled off the things that they needed, we'll have them back in no time. Looks like they're going to use laundry for the show. Lillian circled her head many times in a towel that still was quite damp. On top of that turban she slapped some red cherries and bellowed, now ladies, let's vamp. For it is nearly midnight, our costumes are done, and each is stellar creation. It's truly amazing what you can pull off if you use your imagination. Oh no, what's that? The babe wondered, confused. Then Lil said, add this to your list. Your imagination's the talent to think of things that don't really exist. Now all that we need, Tilly furrowed her brow, are some lights and a stage and a curtain. Why, Tilly, chirped Lily, just open your eyes. There's plenty to work with, that's certain. That tree stump will serve as a marvellous stage. The moon will provide us the light. And what better curtain than that lovely willow? The baby could tell Lil was right. Now places, Lily shouted. The show must go on. And oh, from the very first cue, the act was a clutter of thrilling delight. There was nothing those girls couldn't do. Lil sang an air about thugs in Montmartre and the contraband truffles they sold. Her hair stood on end as she hit the last note, and a poodle nearby passed out cold. And Joyce came on stage as a pizza to go. There's never anyone like her. Her jokes were so funny that Baby Divine thought someone had best change her diaper. Tilly performed a short tango to start, then offered a sparkling gavotto, which sieged right into an one-footed hula that had them all glued on the spot. More, more, cried Baby Divine. I want to show you the picture. That is the picture of them performing. More, more, cried Baby Divine. She'd never seen grown-ups so jolly. Then she noticed that Lily was calling for her to join in the gala finale. That's all that it took. She jumped on her feet. Her soul heard the call of the stage. She was running full tilt towards the lights and the magic when a voice bellowed out in a rage. You on a stage? What astonishing ghoul! You're a nothing, a washout, a nerd. You think you're so cute and so charming? Well, kid, you're not only dumb, you're absurd. Yes, there was Anxiety right on the stage, as ugly and heartless as ever. What's stopping you, sweetheart? Lost all your nerve? Well, guess when you'll find it. Never. Now the ladies were quite unaware of the brute. They continued their warbling and wiggling, right in the face of the furious fiend, and suddenly Baby was giggling. That's right, Baby giggled, and then she guffawed, which the monster could just not believe. The stronger she laughed, the weaker he grew, till he sheepishly squeaked, "Think I'll leave!" He practically tripped over Tilly's pink sheet in his hurry to exit the stage right. He shrank like a sweater till all that was left was a grimace of rage in the night. And then it was over. The terror was gone. Baby flew on the stage. Some primeval instinct propelled her down centre, and theatrical art came of age. She basked in the limelight and knew she had found a place where she'd always belonged. Her spirit took flight, and she did what she could to join in the jubilant song. Oh dear, there's a song here. I'm not sure if I can sing it. I think I'm not going to try the song, but I think it's a song about overcoming fear. I'll read a little bit of it. So you've been to the Alps and you've been to the Baltic. You've Latin is perfect. Your Latin is perfect. You've memorized Shakespeare. You've swatted your way. I don't think I can read it. It's all a little bit interesting, but I think it's a song about overcoming fear. And as the spectacular drew to a close, who should come out the woods but elder divines who watched open-mouthed as their baby delivered the goods. They heard her sing note after note till Tabali they saw her chasse like Pavlova. The staggering passion she brought to her act was something they couldn't get over. How foolish they felt, how stupidly stuffy. They'd been too myopic to see. Their child was a treasure, a gem to be cherished, a baby divine indeed. Mr. and Mrs. Divine were ecstatic. They whistled, they stomped, and they cheered. When they called to their baby, "We love you, we love you," the babe shed her very first tear. Finally, all the bows were completed. The Ebullient Mrs. Devine rushed up to her child, throwing flowers and kisses, crying, "Oh, I'm so glad you're mine." "Now wait," said Miss Tilly. "I must ask the kid if she thought we were good or a bore." But the only response out of Baby Devine, of course you have guessed it, was "More!" "Oh no," laughed Miss Joyce with a sigh of relief. "No more, please, no more for tonight. In a few moments the sun will be up, and we're not at our best in the light. So come everyone, the festivity's over. It's time we all headed back home. There are limits to everything, even to fun. Remember what happened to Rome." And off went the troupe, a most fetching sextet, all happily prancing away. Her mum and her dad beamed as Baby kept up with a turbulent pas de bourrée. They were all out of breath when they reached the Devines. The Baby had tripped once or twice, but there in the doorway the ladies bent down and patted their prudent advice. "Make sure that your life is a rare entertainment. It doesn't take everything drastic. You needn't be gorgeous or wealthy or smart, just very enthusiastic." The Baby looked with great love in her heart, quite moved by her friend's valediction, and farewells took place such as one only finds in later Victorian fiction. The ladies soon vanished like stars in the morning, for daylight was quickly advancing. The elder Devine said, "It's been quite a night, dear. It's sleep you need now, not more dancing." Baby Devine Sante basked through the door, and into her cradle she leapt. Her eyes were half closed, she was pooped as can be, but so glad she hadn't slept. For she'd learn how to laugh, and she'd learn how to cry, and to use her imagination. The loss of some sleep seemed a small price to pay for such a divine education. And just to make everything even more rosy, her folks said, "We know we were rude, but won't you forgive us? We love you like crazy." Then they kissed her and tenderly cooed. They sang her a lullaby. Then they tucked in her boa, they smoothed her red hair, then the elder Devines went to bed. Baby Devine was alone in the dark, but it no longer filled her with dread. For she thought of her folks and the dames and their gifts, the garland, the boa, the nose. She thought of the bird that had taken her soaring, and she thought of her mother's white rose. And the Baby Devine felt the call of the challenge of life and the urge to explore, and she vowed as she started to dream of tomorrow to never stop calling for more. The end. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I think it's a good message about enjoying the adventure of life and not getting overwhelmed by difficulties and fear. And it's a good message for everyone at the moment. There's so many wonders to discover in life, and they're just round the next corner. And enthusiasm is really important, particularly in these times. Thank you for joining me, and I'll join you for the next book. That's love to you all. Take care. Bye for now. Hope you enjoyed it.